Paul was the only person in the building when he very clearly heard the sound of footsteps. He ran after the intruder, but there was nobody there. GreenGate Brewery in Middleton Greater Manchester is an independently run brewery since 1828, but it is important to give you the history of the place before I tell you more about the recorded incidents of the site. Originally, cottages were the only structures that stood on this site, and they are the original brewery buildings that date back to the 17th century, so some point in the 1600s. There is no specific date or any more information about the cottages that I can locate, so they could be older, but the deeds do mention a Greengate house being established on the site in 1791. The buildings were then purchased from a William Hilton due to monetary issues and the death of his father, a Mr. Thomas Hilton, who was a weaver by trade. The man who bought the site and the standing buildings was a cotton manufacturer named John Lee. He bought them in 1828 to set himself up as a brewer. Even though he had no experience of training as a brewer, he saw a business opportunity. Later in the 1800s, the brewery sank a well. This is basically a vertical mine shaft that were often dug by hand and pick. But during the 1800s, mechanical drilling first started being used to access underground water sources, making it easier, faster and safer. However, in the making of the brewery well, it's recorded that up to 8 lives were lost. And in the 1930s, when the brewery supervisor went missing, staff and police looked everywhere for him, for days, only to find him found curled up at the bottom of the well. Unfortunately, he was found deceased. There have been many rumours about the deaths from workers falling into vats and drowning in beer, but I haven't found any evidence to back these up. However, in August 2014, a 30-year-old delivery driver went missing from his truck, and the alarm was raised when he wasn't in the location he was supposed to be. But when he was found, he had fallen to his death in an empty beer tanker, in what was reported to be a tragic accident. But this has left some people to link it back to the paranormal behaviour that runs riot across the site. Here are some more accounts that have been reported and recorded countless times over the years. There is a man who walks around in a long white coat, but when you speak to him, he vanishes. There is a room on the top floor that nobody wants to go to, and they avoid it if they can. It's dimly lit, and it's filled with rows and rows of filing cabinets. There are many reports of activity up there, but the most common sighting at the brewery is a hovering brown cloaked figure. It's unknown if it's a man or a woman, but the figure is tall and slim, and it moves towards you, gliding between the filing shelves. But just before the entity reaches you, it glides to its left into a solid cabinet and vanishes. In the boardroom, there is a lady that is often seen as she sits at the table, surrounded by wooden panelled walls decorated by old painted portraits. And a grandfather clock stands in the corner next to the biggest portrait. The table is in the centre of the room, and she has her back to the table and the door. She seems to be lost in thought, staring into an area that is a cupboard today, but many years ago she would have been staring into a fire. She is often seen here, but just outside the room people get a negative sensation. And one night, a night watchman, basically a security guard, was making his rounds, walking round the site, making sure everything was off and secure. He was struck across the face so hard he was nearly knocked into the wall. Even though he was hit with some power, there was nobody around, and there was nothing that could have fallen and struck him. He was so startled by this, he cut short his patrol and ran straight out of the building. He stayed outside the gate until 6 AM in the morning, when more staff arrived to open the brewery. He refused to go back inside the building alone, and he quit his job, refusing to come back. There are so many things seen by so many staff, past and present, as most workers can report a feeling of being watched at least once or twice during their time there. Spanners and kettles can often be moved around, only to find them where they were supposed to be a few moments later after looking for them. Moans, sighs and odd noises are heard at all times of the day and night. Alongside this, people walk up behind them, or walk up and stand next to them, and when the staff turn to look, the person is gone. Paul was working in the fermenting room in the brew house. As he was working, he paused, standing upright, stretching his back. He heard a sound. He could hear a footstep, and then another. He heard the footsteps loud and clear walking away from him, and across the floor, up the wooden stairs, each step clearly audible as the shoe made contact with the wooden face of the step. Paul thought this was strange, as he was working alone in this section of the building. Taking a moment to process what he had heard, and thinking a visitor might have got lost or a delivery driver had got turned around, he then followed the footsteps to investigate, quickly jogging up the stairs. But when he got to the room, he looked around, but there was no one there. The room was empty. Later, when Paul was working in the fermenting room, again, out the corner of his eye, Paul saw a man walk across the room and go into the office on the far side. Paul, thinking this was the head brewer, quickly finished what he was working on and raced after him. But again, no one was around, which was odd, as the door Paul used was the only way in and out of the room. Again, the sightings and footsteps are common for the staff that work there. The Greengate Brewery has also featured on an episode of Most Haunted, which is a UK paranormal TV show, where they would go to locations to try and film ghosts and unexplained activity. In this episode, some stuff was caught on camera. Yvette Fielding and Carl Beattie experienced the noises of multiple corks dropping, where they fled in terror. Stuart Torville caught a barrel moving up and down on video. This is something that's been reported by tour groups, but it's never been on camera. With a place that's been used as cottages since the 1600s and possibly earlier, there will have been happiness, sorrow and death. And added to that, the deaths that have occurred with people working on or around the site of the brewery over the period of its existence, that's got to leave some sort of mark on the place. And I have found many people that say there might be some sort of malevolent spirit that is the culprit of some of the negative feelings and perhaps deaths that have occurred at the place. Well, that'll do it for today. If you enjoyed that, let me know in the comments. And let me know if you want me to do an episode of the Haunted Pubs of Manchester. If you're new here, don't forget to like and subscribe. That'll do it, and take care.